Well, this is one on the road, one on the river this week. It's becoming a habit arriving by boat. This is the River Exe, which is the best way to get into the centre of Exeter. Excuse the hat, it's bucketing down, typical summer's evening.
Hello once again, and thank you for watching this video. And as ever, if you like the videos I make on YouTube, then please think about hitting the subscribe button. It really does help the channel to grow. And if you click the little bell icon, then you'll be notified next time there's a new video. Anyway, that clip you just saw there was from the 28th of August 1984, and it was a programme called One for the Road on BBC Two, I think it was. And it was basically a half-hour programme televising what was happening on the Radio 1 Road Show, and they did 5 of these over the summer months in 1984, and that one was all filmed in Exeter, and it also featured some clips of bands performing, including the Human League at Ritzy's nightclub in Exeter.
Human League!
Now, in the same series, they also came down to Plymouth, which is where I actually live, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later on. But this is an extra bit I've put into the video that I didn't realise I had, and now we're going to go back to me wearing a different t-shirt where I start the video that I filmed earlier this afternoon. Anyway, today, 1984, summer, August, really busy month. Great time was had by all on that summer. I remember that summer very well. I remember the weather being particularly good, and I remember spending pretty much the entirety of the summer in my bedroom listening to music and playing computer games on my BBC Micro and occasionally strumming the guitar. Now, the t-shirt I'm wearing today, if you think, is that a really obscure Catherine Hamnet design from 1984? No, it's not. It's a t-shirt I had made up, and I had it made up as a little joke with my good friend Frank, who is a music promoter in Scotland and in London, put on many shows for my band All Living Fear, and did a Secrets for September show as well. And just as a little laugh, I had this t-shirt made, I think it was in about 2010, 2011, something like that. And anyway, I thought I'd wear it today just for a bit of fun. Anyway, 1984, August, what did we have happening in that great time? Well, a lot of really big records came out in that month, and there was a few interesting things on the telly as well, and stuff in print. But what we're going to mention first is, I mentioned it a few months back when it was its anniversary, but this week Thomas Dolby has been on tour in the UK, and I bought this, and you know, you might be interested in this. This isn't sponsored or anything. I just happened to buy this and I thought it was interesting. And there's this magazine called Electronic Sounds, and I do buy it from time to time because they have a lot of good interviews and features in it, and you know, it's a nicely presented magazine. And this month you get a Thomas Dolby single, and on this single you get a couple of classic tracks from the back in the day, and you get Hyperactive, and you get Mooloo the Rainforest, and it's a, you know, it's a nice little single. And I thought, yeah, I'll pick that up with the magazine. Haven't read the magazine yet, but you know, it's worth getting hold of a copy if you're a fan of Thomas Dolby, as I am. Now, the first week of August, which the singles chart starts on the 5th of August. And as I've mentioned before, when I talk about releases, all I'm talking about is when they hit the charts, not when they actually first came out, because that's basically too much hassle to research. But finding the first entry on the charts is actually a lot easier. And what entered at 33 in the charts is this, Howard Jones's Like to Get to Know You Well. Really great single. Wasn't technically on an album, but it was on the 12-inch mix album, but a different version, I think, to what's on here. Or the B-side was different, I can't remember now actually, but no, the international mix. I think some of those mixes on the 12-inch album were still slightly different, but yeah, this hit the charts at number 33. And other great well-known tracks that entered the charts, at number 41 you had Miami Sound Machine's Dr. Beat, which I think was the first big Gloria Estefan record. Elton John entered the charts with another song that went on to become a big hit, Passengers, entered at number 52. And another classic rock song entered at 55. That was Gary Moore's Empty Rooms. Now, there was another Michael Jackson old song with new backing entered the charts. This was called Girl You Sew Together. Again, didn't really hit the charts. But then entering at number 76 is another iconic song from this year, and that's Big in Japan from Alphaville. Obviously went on to become massive, and it's still one of the most, I'd say probably is one of the most well-loved songs from this year. Now, as for albums, well, if you're into metal, then an album that didn't probably sell that well at the time, but has gone on to become massive, is Metallica's Ride the Lightning. That entered the album charts at number 92. But again, very slow burn on this album. And, you know, once Metallica got a lot bigger, then the back catalogue kept selling. And, you know, I'm sure Ride the Lightning still sells by the bucket load to this day. But entering the album charts at number 1, again, is an absolutely iconic record of the era. And that's this, which is now, that's what I call music number 3. Now, the Now albums, you know, if you're watching this video, you know all about the Now albums, but the 3 that came out in 1984 really do have absolute, you know, is a masterclass of pop music. I mean, I'm going to read out most of the tracks. You know, you've got Duran Duran's The Reflex, Nick Kershaw's Won't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, Sister Sledge, Thinking of You, OMD, Locomotion, Ultravox, Dancing with Tears in My Eyes, Howard Jones's Pearl in the Shell, Blancmange, Don't Tell Me, Phil Collins, Against All Odds, Frankie's Two Tribes, Grandmaster Flash, White Lines, Special AKA, Nelson Mandela, Womack and Womack, Lovable, Style Council, You're the Best Thing, Bob Marley, One Love, Bronski Beat, Small Town Boy, Queen, I Want to Break Free, Cyndi Lauper, Time After Time, Alison Moyer, Love, Resurrection, Bluebells, Young at Heart, Bananarama, Robert De Niro's Waiting, Propaganda, Dr. Mabuse, Tina Turner, What's Love Got to Do with It, Flying Pickets, When You're Young and in Love. Then side 4, Wham! Wake Me Up Before You Go, Go Thompson Twins, You Take Me Up, Weather Girls, It's Raining Men, 27, I'm not going to mention his name, 28, The Art Company, Susanna, 29, Madness, One Better Day, 30, David Silver and Red Guitars. Out of those 30 tracks, probably 26 of them you could play in succession and at an 80s night, and everybody be dancing for the duration. Absolute classic compilation. I mean, I always used to say that Now 2 was the best Now album, but I think this one is actually pretty much hard to beat. Absolutely wonderful. And if you notice, I've still got my original RM price ticket on it, which I think was the labels. It was either Martin's Newsagents or Woolworths used those labels. I can't remember. But yeah, classic record anyway. So moving on to the next week, well, if you're into metal again, this entered the charts at number 27. Again, a record I bought at the time, Iron Maiden's 2 Minutes to Midnight. Certainly one of my favourite of Derek Riggs' artwork covers, that is. And if you were like a 12-year-old like I was, on the B side, there's a track called Mission from Ari, which is basically a recording of the band having an argument backstage. And it was all very exciting for a 12-year-old because there were a lot of swear words on it. Not as many swear words as the 12-inch mix of Hello John Got a New Motor by Alexis Sale. And if you've not heard that, then it's part 4 you need to listen to. Also coming out this week, entering at 37, was The Ink in the World by David Sylvian. A very underrated song. If you don't know that song, give it a listen. It's great. Then at 38, Tears for Fears' Mother's Talk. Now, Tears for Fears did stretch the release of their singles somewhat because Mother's Talk came out and then I think Shout came out, but then the album that they were on, Songs from the Big Chair, didn't come out till the following year.
The new single Mother's Talk, which I have to be honest and say to you now, I didn't like originally, and then it just grew on me incredibly, and it's quite brilliant. Mother's Talk. It's quite a different direction for Tears for Fears, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, that's what came of because we took some time off, decided to do something different, and make life a bit more exciting for us. So that's what came out of it, really.
Wasp, again, more hair metal than straight metal. I Want to Be Somebody, that came out entered the chart 77. I remember that coming out on picture disc. I think my mate Bernard had it at the time. And then The Cult, Go West, classic cult single, entered at 91. And then this is really interesting. Now, if you think back to earlier in the year, Radio Gaga by Queen, absolutely massive song, written by Roger Taylor. Huge, huge record. Roger Taylor brings out a solo single, enters the chart at 98, Strange Frontier. Perfectly decent record, not a bad song, but didn't do anything. It didn't get any higher than 98. And that, I think, shows the value of the band over the individuals. And this is the thing with Queen. No member of Queen, at the time Queen existed, ever really got anywhere near as successful as the band. I mean, Freddie came close. I mean, Love Kills wasn't a bad single, did okay. I Was Born to Love You, not bad. But even then, the Queen versions of the Freddie solo singles were much better than the original. Well, I think so anyway. But yeah, so that only got to number 98. Now, as for albums, not many big albums came out this week even. The rock band Y&T, they had their album In Rock We Trust, entered at number 40. And at number 85, an album that never gets talked about that much is the soundtrack to the film Electric Dreams, which entered at number 85. Now, I can't find my copy of this, but I do have it on vinyl somewhere. And it's got an interesting cover because it has like a plastic PVC wraparound printed that goes up outside the main record sleeve. So it probably cost Virgin Records a bomb at the time to make. But yeah, you know, it had a few decent tunes on it. Now, the next week, we've got some seriously big songs. The first one enters the charts at number 3, and that's Stevie Wonder's I Just Called to Say I Love You, probably his biggest hit ever. You know, it stayed at number 1 for ages, and it's the song that you hear on the radio the most. Then entering at 23, another one of my favourites from Spandau Ballet, I'll Fly For You. This is a really great tune, and I remember this isn't my original copy, this is one I bought much later, but I actually had it on picture disc. And I really like there's a remix of it called the Glide Mix. And it's a really great track. And, you know, this nice packaging as well, you know. Bear in mind it's only a single, but, you know, nice deluxe gatefold cover on this one. So, yeah, it must have cost them a fortune to manufacture. And I think I remember seeing this in Tops for 99p. So obviously trying to get it higher in the charts. So they must have lost a lot of money making that record. Now, entering the charts at number 56, a little known tune you may know of by a well-respected American session musician. His name was Ray Parker Jr. It probably is still his name to this day. And it's a song called Ghostbusters, and you all know that song. But that entered the charts at 56. Now, Lloyd Cole, who I'm looking forward to seeing next month. In fact, I'm going to be photographing him because Lloyd's very kindly given me a photo pass for the gig. Lloyd Cole and the Commotion's Forest Fire, that entered the charts at 59. And then entering at 66, another guilty pleasure for me, is Bucks Fizz's Talking in Your Sleep, which is a great song. Now, Cyndi Lauper, her sort of third hit, if you like, She Bop, that entered at number 84. And then right at the bottom, entering at 92, another goth classic, Alien Sex Fiends Dead and Buried. Now, as for albums, again, in the summer, it's quite a quiet time for new releases in some respects. You know, generally it's the spring and the autumn when big albums get released. But this week we had Phil Fearon and Galaxy's debut album, and Shack Attack's Down on the Streets, that also came out this week. Now, as for the last week of 1984's August, well, there's some particular favourites of mine came out. Now, the first one is entering at number 23, and it's this, which is the Smiths' William, It Was Really Nothing. Now, this is almost more famous for the B-sides than it is for the A-side, because obviously William, It Was Really Nothing is a great Smiths song, but the B-side of the 7-inch is Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want, obviously covered by the Dream Academy, and it's been covered by many artists since. But the bonus track on the 12-inch mix, which I think to the detriment of when it got released on its own, and that is How Soon Is Now, first appeared as a B-side bonus track on this record. And obviously it's probably the most iconic Smiths song of them all. And they later re-released that on its own, but it didn't chart that well because Most people had this, and if they didn't have this, they would have had the Hatful of Hollow album, which it was also on. But everyone heard it first off this 12-inch single. Now, entering at number 24 is Depeche Mode's Master and Servant. Again, classic Depeche track. But then entering at 32, and I'm going to be slightly careful how I hold the sleeve for this, because I might get cancelled for showing something on it. So I'm going to just hold it like this. And this is Madame Butterfly by Malcolm McLaren. Now, this is one of the, I would say, one of the most creative records of the year, because you take classical opera, Puccini's Madame Butterfly, and you add a Lindrum to it, and then McLaren tells the story on it. I think it's an absolutely brilliant record. It's probably in my top 5 favourite songs of 1984 for sure. It's a brilliant, brilliant record. If you don't know it, go and have a listen to it, because it's unlike anything else that you probably ever heard, and certainly ever heard in that year. Now, entering at 37, another classic record, Level 42's Hot Water, one of their first real big hits. And it's a great song, and it's always great to hear live when you go and see them. Now, entering at 39, not one of their best known songs, is Sunset Now by Heaven 17. Now, this is from the album How Men Are, and for me, this is one of my favourite Heaven 17 records, particularly because it's actually a 5-track EP, and I had it on cassette originally. In fact, I still do have it on cassette, but this looks better for displaying on a video. And it's got some extra tracks on it: Counterforce 1 and 2, and a track called Flame Down, and 2 mixes of Sunset Now. Again, if you don't know this song, give it a listen, because it's a great song. And you know, if by any chance any member of Heaven 17 or anyone that knows them is watching this, please can you start doing this live, because I've seen them many times, but I've never heard this song performed live. Now, entering at 51 is another classic metal track, and that's Killed by Death by Motorhead. Now, this was a kind of a standalone single, but it went with a compilation album, which I've got here, and I'll just show you the cover. This was their No Remorse album, which was like the first kind of proper Motorhead compilation. And what's quite neat about the cover, as you can possibly see, is it's actually made of leather. So it's like a sort of a leather-bound cover. And the cassette version that you could use as a cigarette packet holder as well. And you know, it's got all their classics. You know, Ace of Spades, Jailbait, Killed by Death, Overkill, Please Don't Touch, the song they did with Girls' School, Bomber, Louie Louie, We Are the Road Crew, Locomotive. You know, great record. And that was the original version. It's been reissued many times, and it eventually came out on CD as well. But yeah, Killed by Death, classic Motorhead song. I remember first seeing the video of that on, I think they showed it on Whistle Test. I think when Whistle Test first came back on, I think they showed it, or they might have showed it on Rock Around the Clock. More I will talk about later. But yeah, also in this week, Visage had a single called Love Glove from their final album.
I mean, for the last 2 years we've been busy with clubs, but because of contracts and management we haven't been able to do anything musically. But now Visage is back. This is our new single, The Love Glove.
Who's the lineup of the band now then?
Myself and Rusty, and then there's Steve Barnacle, Andy Barnett and Gary Barnacle. We've just been in Egypt and Kenya doing the history of the Visage documentary, and then that's going to be released with the album Beat Boy.
Aztec Camera had a single out called All I Need Is Everything at 61, and at 63 African Bambaataa and James Brown had a single out called Unity. And Mark Almond had a single at 67 called You Have. Don't think it was a particularly big hit. And talking to Rusty Egan, 88, Rusty Egan teamed up with Kirk Brandon, and they did a single called Original Sin and Do You Believe in the Westworld, 2 old classic Theatre of Hate songs performed live. And that entered at 88. And at 94 was, at the time, the last ever Specials single, although Jerry Dammers by that point had renamed the band back to being the Special AKA, and that was called What About I Like What I Like About You Most Is Your Girlfriend. That was their last single. And then floating at number 100 is The Fall with a song called Creep. Now, as for albums, the main album that came out this month is another great album, is A Flock of Seagulls, Story of a Young Heart, which entered the album charts at number 30. So yeah, that's all the releases that we had from this year. I'm just going to show you a few bits of memorabilia I found out, actually, because obviously 84 was the summer of Frankie, and there were many unofficial things that had come out. And one thing with these Frankie Goes to Hollywood magazines, and they weren't really a magazine. They were like, basically it was a poster with stuff printed on it. And if we look at this one, you know, we've got some little articles there, and then if I fold it open a bit more, you can see on the back there's all sorts of bits and bobs, and then on the other side you've got a big poster of the band there. And you know, it's a nice little thing to have. And then there was another one that they released again. I can't remember when these came out, but I'm guessing they came out round about the summer, because neither of them make reference to the Welcome to the Pleasure Dome album. They only talk about the singles. And I think this one, again, it's got a nice poster and various articles. And incidentally, it's got a photograph from the Two Tribes video shoot, which you probably can't see there, but I'll just zoom in on it. And I've not actually seen that photograph before. Anyhow, as for television, well, there were two things that I've picked out this month that I think are interesting. Now, the first thing was a TV special that went out on BBC television, and it was called Rock Around the Clock. Now, I think the BBC did 3 of these. They did one in 1983, one this year, and they did another one in 1986. And it was an all-night sort of music marathon, if you like. I think it started at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it went on till about 6 a.m. the following day. And it had all sorts in it. It had concerts, people like Van Morrison. It had they showed the Last Waltz film. But they showed loads of music videos, and they had various people in the studio. And I'm going to show you a few little clips from that.
Hello and welcome to the 2nd annual edition of Rock Around the Clock. This is the programme that actively incites you to stay glued to your television for 15 hours of music.
Well, from now till 6 in the morning, we have live concerts from people like Simple Minds, New Order, Aztec Camera, The Cure and The Pretenders. We have such feature films as the first British TV showing of the Buddy Holly story. We have The Last Waltz, a great film, another movie called FM. We also have ample opportunities for you to ring up and demand to see certain videos, and indeed later the chance to select an entire programme by phone. And also this year we've got a competition in which we're giving away lots of extremely desirable prizes.
Reading this stuff,
You didn't have to pay for it, Steve.
Wonderful chap who lives on Bodmin Moor, isn't he?
I don't know.
Him and his 2 missuses.
He's had a drink. Viewers, he's had a drink.
Right, this is now this is right.
The kangaroo is loose in the top paddock.
You talk about newspapers. This is real news. Have you won your £1 million yet?
This may not be the most appropriate time.
Have you not won your million? If you ain't won your million, you ain't.
Steve Strange! Nice to be here. Steve, what do you think about the contest then?
Quite good, actually. Looking forward to it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good one, okay. Next up from Radio 1, it's Mr. Simon Bates! And Simon, what do you think about the contest then?
Well, Steve, it looks like it's going to be quite a task to pick a winner from this lot, Steve.
Thanks very much indeed. Simon Bates, okay. And next off is also from Radio 1, Janice Long. Round of applause. Janice, now what do you reckon about the contest?
Well, Steve, it looks as going it's going to be quite a task picking a winner from this lot.
This lot.
This lot, yes, correct. God, she had 3 weeks off from work to learn this. Next up from Marillion, please welcome, it's Fish.
Well, Steve, it looks like it's going to be quite a task picking a winner from this lot, Jimmy.
This is Morrissey answering phones over here. What sort of calls have you been getting? Anybody? Mainly obviously calls, you know, the type that I really need. Yeah, have you been returning them similarly?
Well, of course, yeah. I've taken down lots of numbers and, addresses and things. Oh, yeah. Going to have a busy week, I think.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's of interest, I think, is in the summer when Radio 1 did the Radio 1 road shows, they had a companion TV programme. And it was only sort of 2 or 3 episodes. It wasn't like a big long series. And it was called One for the Road. But on the one that was transmitted actually right at the very end of the month. But I'm going to bring it into the August thing because it's, it's a bit more... It's actually transmitted on the 1st of September, but it would have been filmed probably earlier that week, so it fits in the August timeline. And that was One for the Road, and it came to Plymouth, which is where I happen to live. And what I really liked about this is that you got to see some sort of mimed live music that was done in the Palace Theatre down on Union Street, which is a very iconic building in this city, and it's a building that a lot of people want to see restored. At the moment it's absolutely derelict and it's in a right old state, but back in 1984 you got Lloyd Cole doing a set and you got Depeche Mode doing a set, and an absolute iconic character of the Southwest, if you grew up as a kid like I did, was a bunny rabbit called Gus Honeybun. And if you don't know who Gus Honeybun is, which if you're outside the Southwest you probably wouldn't have done.
Waggle ears, jump up and down, wink, 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 waggle ears, jump up and down. Peter, if you'd met this rabbit earlier in your career, you could have been a television star yourself by now. Wink, wink. Anything else that you did, Gus? Waggle it. The magic button, please. No, don't press the magic button, because when you press the magic button, apparently something terrible comes onto the screen. No, I'll just waggle my ears. What are you going to do? Not the button! He
was like a rabbit puppet who used to read out children's birthdays on ITV at tea time every day. And initially he would just change the background colour, so, and he'd do bunny hops and things, and everybody watched Gus Honeybun. It was it's essential watching for children. And he ended up being on this BBC music programme, which back then it was very unusual for anything from like ITV to be on the BBC or vice versa. It was very much 2 separate entities. So, it was quite unusual from that fact. But yeah, it was, it was a bit of fun, the programme. And it is nice to see, a programme with live music in, a place that I live in. And this was the thing, there were an awful lot, it wasn't just The Hitman and Her. There were many music programmes made in the 80s where they would go to like nightclubs and have bands in there. I think there was another One for the Road that was in Norwich that I think the Thompson Twins were on. There was another one that was done at Ritzy's in Exeter, and if you hunt around YouTube, you can find a lot of this stuff, and it's all quite interesting. Slap bang in the middle of the month then, we've got the August edition of Smash Hits going from the 16th to the 29th. Howard Jones is on the front cover, and we've got a little mini poster of the Bluebells on the back. And yeah, let's have a look inside and see what we've got. So, photo of Queen from the It's a Hard Life video shoot there. And our sort of contents page, it includes the Smiths, 717, Howard, Tears for Fears, Depeche Mode, Duran Duran. There's a HMV advert for Phil Fearon's album that came out on this time, and we've got a little feature on Ozzy Osbourne, as well as the lyrics from Others Talk by Tears for Fears. Now, double play cassettes. These were certainly a big thing at the time, where you got 2 albums on the same cassette tape. So basically, it was another way of kind of repackaging things, because obviously the cassette Walkman was a massive thing. So they're advertising some back catalogue stuff from the likes of The Jam, Billy Joel, Thompson Twins' first 2 albums, Bob Marley, etc. And I mean, like, for example, Fleetwood Mac's Rumours and the self-titled Fleetwood Mac album, as in the first Lindsay and Stevie album, being done for a 2-for-1 offer, as was things like Ultravox's Rage in Eden and Vienna, Spandau Ballet's Journey to Glory and Diamonds, Jean-Michel Jarre's Oxygen and Equinox. That actually also came out as a 2 LP vinyl set, because that's actually the version that I have. And there's really sort of slightly odd pairings, like The Who's Live at Leeds and Who Are You? Two completely different albums from two different ends of the career. And Neil Young's After the Gold Rush and Harvest. So yeah, quite a lot of good albums there you could get 2 for 1 on at the time. And I think as well, some of these albums probably weren't then as well regarded and well respected as they are now, because obviously these albums weren't that old at the time. Some were only like 5 or 6 years old, whereas now, you know, they're nearly 50 years old. Anyway, some more lyrics. Pointer Sisters, I Need You, and Spandau Ballet's I'll Fly For You. And yeah, let's have a little look through some of the articles. And one of the TV highlights this month was the Radio 1 One for the Road show, or Radio 1 On the Road, presented by Peter Powell. And there was one episode that was filmed in Norwich, and there's a still from the after show of the Thompson twins and Frankie Goes to Hollywood together, because they were both on the same episode. And then we got a photo of Kurt Brandon and Rusty Egan when they formed their band, The Senate, and which I mentioned earlier, they put out a single of 2 Spears songs, Original Sin and Do You Believe in the Westworld. Now, one thing that's interesting is that there's a full-page advert for Iron Maiden's 2 Minutes to Midnight, along with all the UK tour dates. Now, bearing in mind, there were a lot of other magazines, rock magazines, obviously Kerrang being the biggest one, that would advertise this sort of thing. It's interesting that a pop magazine like Smash Hits, that has Howard Jones on the cover, would still have an advert for Iron Maiden, full page, listing all the tour dates. And bearing in mind that a lot of the people that bought this magazine would have probably been too young to be able to go to something like an Iron Maiden concert, because there may well have been, you know, 16 age limits on going to these gigs. It's just interesting the fact that they still advertised it in the magazine, because I guess people's tastes were quite wide, because I was buying Iron Maiden records and I was buying Howard Jones records at the same time. There's a nice interview here about Depeche Mode recording their album in Berlin. And yeah, it's nice photos of the studio here. And yeah, nice interview that. I remember reading that at the time and being quite fascinated, them talking about, you know, different mixes and things that they were doing at the time. Now, here's a non-music related thing that you can possibly remember. This is an advert for Barclays Super Savers, and all the banks at the time in the mid-80s, they were trying to get you to have a bank account, and they tried to lure you in by, you know, you get a nice big folder that you can keep your statements and your bits and bobs in, and there was usually an obligatory money box, and there was also vouchers for getting money off buying cassettes and records and things. And I'm pretty sure I had a bank account with Barclays to get the Super Saver pack, and then I closed it after a while, and then I opened up a NatWest one, and then I opened up a Lloyd's one, and it was just a gimmick to get all the freebies, really, and you know, everybody did it. Now, I always find the singles reviews and the album reviews in here fascinating, especially when you look at songs by artists that eventually get to become absolutely massive. The first one I'm going to pick up is The Cults Go West, and the review says, yet another offshoot of the so-called positive punk combo, Southern Death Cult. Still calling it positive punk, the word goth was not really being bandied around that much at the time. And it says, treat yourself to an embittered, angst-ridden identity crisis. Someone give them a late-night Channel 4 programme, please. Well, I think they did do a late-night concert, but I think it was on BBC Two, and it was at Brixton Academy. That wasn't for a couple of years. Now, this is interesting that they somehow decided to re-release Astrid Gabato's The Girl from Ipanema. And one little line that says in this review, it says at the end, no doubt what Sade listened to for late night inspiration. Well, I think that's probably absolutely correct. I think this sort of stuff probably did influence Sade a lot. Now, here's a song I don't remember at the time, and I'm going to dig it out and have a listen to it. Apparently Rockwell, who had the big hit Somebody's Watching Me, again, probably more popular because of the fact they had Michael Jackson doing the backing vocals, although it is a good song. He did a cover version of the Beatles' Taxman, and the review says, a respectful, almost wistful treatment of the timeless Beatles song, when I expected a good disco version from the mysterious man behind Somebody's Watching Me, uncluttered and effective with a tasteful 60s sitar chord or two thrown in, a hit. Well, sadly it wasn't a hit, but I'm really curious to listen to this now. Whereas the Tears for Fears review is a little bit harsh. Mother's Talk, it says, Tears for Fears have done a terrible thing. They've read their own reviews, taken offence to all those spiteful accusations of weedy wimpdom, and tried to grab some musical muscle via self-consciously heavy Araf Mardin-inspired production. Out of their depth and the style they felt comfortable with, they floundered in chaos, a great shame. Well, it definitely was a different sound to, you know, Mad World, but I think Mother's Talk's a perfectly fine single myself. Looking at the album reviews then, that are all done by different people, the most popular album is Test Department's Beating the Retreat. You know, if you don't know Test Department, they're very much a sort of slightly left field electronic type industrial based group. But also there's reviews of Matt Bianco. And the Matt Bianco review says, dark, sexy lead vocals fronting a collection of brass and percussion rhythms, rather like Tijuana sound of the 50s. At times, though, it can get too slick for its own good. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, they were a very slick, sort of jazzy-inspired pop group. And yeah, then there's the Shack Attack, Down on the Street sound. It's interesting, there was quite a lot of this sort of jazzy sound around at the time, obviously Sade being the most successful. But it says here about Shack Attack, the street Shack Attack Down is more a Bond Street than a hip-hop highway. That's fair to say. Their brand of funk comes string-laden, sophisticated, and at times uncomfortably like some of the stuff Andre Previn pushes out before he got around to flogging TV sets. So yeah, a little bit harsh there, but it's still got 6 out of 10. Of course, Andre Previn also used to advertise music centres. Here's another ad then about banks, and this one's NatWest, and they're giving you a calculator. So you open a NatWest bank account, you get yourself a calculator. Now you've got to remember, calculators were still pretty new and pretty hip things to own back in 1984, particularly these ones that weren't much bigger than a credit card. Well, here's a feature of a band that never particularly made it. They were called M&M, Mark and Martha, and they were both members of Martha and the Muffins, who had a massive hit called Echo Beach, which you probably all know. And they had a single called Black Station, White Stations, and the lyrics are here. There's a little interview, and that's probably the only press they probably ever got. And there's a big feature here on Heaven 17. I mean, at the time, I think Heaven 17 were almost getting bigger than the Human League, because they'd had that massive hit Temptation in '83. Whereas some of the Human League stuff from that point onwards, you know, wasn't as quite as popular. Even though I think the Hysteria album is probably my favourite Human League album. But yeah, How Men Are is a really, really good record. And as I mentioned on the review, I think Sunset Now is probably still my favourite Heaven 17 single. Carrying on our theme of banks wanting your money, the Midland Bank, they're not really into giving you lots of free goodies. They're into giving you discount travel, free banking. Well, at the time, all banks gave you free banking. 24-hour-a-day cash. Ooh, how modern. And student advisors as well. So I think they were probably thinking, you know, we're going to get the intellectual crowd rather than people that just want to get lots of freebies. Now, the Get Smart section is always interesting. There's some, you know, this is before you had the internet. You wrote a letter to Smash Hits, and one of them is, please supply a list of all Billy Joel's singles and albums released in this country. Dutifully, a discography appears. There's a thing here saying, do you know where I can get tickets for Barry Manilow's upcoming tour? And there's a, I'd love a photo and some details about the new Radio 1 DJ, Dixie Peach. Well, as I recall, Dixie Peach didn't stay on Radio 1 for that long, although I do remember him presenting Top of the Pops a couple of times. And there's can you find me the skirt that Siobhan was from Bananarama was wearing on Top of the Pops? I think this really does show how times have changed. When you think a few years ago, iTunes bought a U2 album and gave it to everybody that had an iTunes account, and everybody was complaining about it, and it just became like the biggest crime ever. Whereas back then, back in the 80s, people were always grateful for anything that was free. And this is a classic thing. You could buy a Summit exercise book, so it's just basically a lined pad of paper, and you can get cassettes at a discount price. So You said, get your Summit exercise books and you can get this great LP cassette featuring Slade, Nick Hayward, Thompson Twins and many more for only $1.99. So you buy an exercise book and then you pay £2 and you get a compilation album. And also you get the chance to win a fantastic Bang & Olufsen hi-fi system. And 50 personal stereos we're giving away to the runners-up. So big promotion. I'm sure lots of people did do this because they wanted that cassette because it would be something that you could have and other people might not have. And the centrefold poster is the Smiths with the lyrics to William It Was Really Nothing. In the sort of gossip section, they're talking about here that apparently Joe Leeway nearly got himself untwinned when he blabbed that Tom Bailey and Alana Curry had taken a holiday together in Bali, causing more chat that they're having a relationship. Well, I mean, everybody knows they were a couple back then, and they eventually got married and had children and all the rest of it. But you know, pop stars used to keep all that stuff secret back in those days. And here they're talking about the fact that Frankie Goes Hollywood might have lost up to £1 million in royalties due to people making bootleg T-shirts of the Frankie Says logo. And I mean, those T-shirts were designed by Catherine Hamnett, so whether Frankie even had the rights to them, I don't know. But certainly every record shop used to sell Frankie Says T-shirts, and a lot of them were not official. That I do know for sure. And here we've got a big feature about Roger Taylor from Duran Duran's wedding. It was no doubt yet in Naples, so you know, not a budget event at a registry office there. And you know, music was all over the TV, and here there's a feature about a TV show that Miles Copeland was behind called Rebellious Jukebox, and there's various photos of the great and the good at the time being filmed for the programme. So you got you know, Meatloaf there, you got Spandau Ballet, obviously Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and yeah, I think it went out on Channel 4, I think, but I don't actually remember seeing it, but obviously Smash Hits decided to do a nice feature on it. Now, you never got many live reviews in Smash Hits, but there's a review here of a Bronski Beat gig that happened to be in a church in Piccadilly. Now, I'm not sure if it's the same church that that I went to when I saw Mike Westbrook a few years ago, which was the church that William Blake was baptised in. But Bronski Beat never really played that many live shows, so it was probably a big thing to them actually doing a live gig. And yeah, there's an interesting little review about it. And the letters page is, I'm not going to read any of them out, but I just had a quick flick through, and it's mostly people being particularly nasty to pop stars, which I kind of think isn't really the ticket. And finally, yet another advert from a bank. This time it's the TSB, and they're trying to entice you by getting you discounts to buying records. Interesting that Fleetwood Mac's Rumours is listed there. So, you know, that's literally been a perennial popular album ever since it was released. And, you know, it's interesting to see it's still there when Smash Hits was more about being right up to date rather than anything from the past. But yeah, so I think being August, students going to college, kids going to school, all thinking about bank accounts. I think that's why all the banks were battling amongst themselves in the summer of '84. And of course, to go with the front cover, there's an interview with Howard Jones. And of course, you know, this is somebody who's maintained a really good career throughout, you know, ever since then. You know, he's 40 years of non-stop making records, touring, and still being great. And he's currently, you know, running across America on tour as we speak, along with Haircut 100 and somebody else whose name escapes me for the minute. Anyhow, that kind of wraps up my my little run through of 1984 for this month, August. Again, you know, many great hits came out, and a lot of good records. So hopefully this might have jogged a few memories. And sorry it's a little bit late. I like to get these out in the kind of the middle of the month, but I've been a bit tied up with other things, so I haven't done much YouTube. But anyway, thanks for watching the video, and I'll catch you on the next one.
A decision, please.
Gaynor Dice as Tracy Ullman.
Gaynor Dice as Tracy Ullman is the winner. Please come up, Gaynor. Where are you? Where's Gaynor?
She's fainting.
Gaynor, here she is. Applause, applause.